All right, the Nigerian Economic Summit Group, a private sector-led think tank and policy advocacy organization, has put out a press release titled Matters of Urgent Attention. In this press release, they listed 15 items that they addressed to the Buhari administration that need urgent attention and need to be addressed immediately. Joining me live in the studio to discuss these matters is the CEO of the Nigerian Economic Summit Group, Mr. Laoye Jaiyeola. Good afternoon to you, sir. Thank you so much for joining us. So,
thank you for having me.
Yes, they're great. You've got a lengthy press release here, urgent attention. Why the sense of urgency in what you've put out?
Well, again, if you realize that the world over experienced COVID, and everywhere in the world we're suffering from this COVID impact. But the reality is that before COVID, Nigeria had its underbelly. And so if we don't address those issues, health is just compounded it. So we have issues ranging from health, humanitarian, economy, and security, all wrapped in together. And so if you don't take the opportunity now to reposition ourselves and do the needful, it's just going to get worse. The MBS released the second quarter report, and we were -6. And a lot of people were clapping and saying, wow, it's not as bad as the ones you just talked about. But people forget that some of those nations could have a V-shaped recession. But for us, unless and until we deal with all those issues, we're not going to get out. And we're now again seeing some tendencies of totalitarianism, some tendencies of wanting to clamp down on the market. And it's important for us to know that unless we are open and transparent, the much needed help we need both locally and outside will not come. That's why we feel it's a sense of urgency. And added to this is the fact that the sense of insecurity is heightening. Now we're facing some food crisis. And if all this work together, you have health, you have economy, you have food, it then means that we're sitting on a keg of gunpowder, which is why for us we believe that we need to bring this to the attention of government.
All right. Thank you so much for that, sir. Now, as a follow-up, do you think anything will happen? Will there be any change? We're used to the Nesg putting out these press releases, also hosting captains of industry to discuss these matters. But do you expect any actual change to take place this time around with what you've put out?
Well, again, we expect them to listen. And people do think that they don't listen. They do listen, but they don't implement as quickly as we want. But like we did say in the statement we put out, we recognize that this work is beyond the public sector. It's a work that requires public, private, the entire Nigeria. And so what we are telling government is that government should take that seriously and bring in stakeholders and listen to other views so that we can get out. We ended up by saying that ours is to partner with government. This is the nation that we have that is ours. But we must work at it collectively. They listen, but they act too slowly. And we're saying that we cannot afford acting slowly because we don't have the luxury of time.
Thank you so much for that, sir. I want to start picking at things specifically now. For instance, the CAMA, the Companies and Allied Matters Act. What are you hearing from businesses and what's your take on the reaction so far with the CAMA? Because it's listed as one of the items in your press release.
Well, again, we commend them for releasing CAMA because we've been at it since the 8th Assembly. The only challenge we have is that there are other issues that came into CAMA that is outside what we discussed. And that's why we said that we do not want those issues that relate to the NGOs and co to really detract from the centerpiece of the things we tried to achieve when we worked on CAMA. If you notice some of the novel things we have in there, it's aimed at bringing in most of the informal sector into the formal sector and making for ease of doing business, ease of rendition of return, ease of formalizing our large informal sectors, which again, we don't have detailed records of. But then added to that, you saw the issues, the churches and a number of them. So what we said is that please listen to as many people as have grievances and ensure that they have fair hearing and well heard, so that we do not use that it's a matter of throwing the baby on the bathwater. We want karma to be worked on. We want it to be implemented and implemented very carefully. But we don't want those things that detract from it to be swept under the carpet. So we said, give everybody fair hearing. After all, we're in a democracy.
Fantastic. On to oil and gas. Oil and gas reform. We're waiting for the petroleum industry bill to be signed into law. What are you expecting at this point?
Well, it hasn't been signed into law. What's there is that what we hear is that the presidency is working at submitting a new bill to the National Assembly for consideration. You recall that the governance one that was submitted at the 8th Republic was not signed into law. And what we have said is that as much as possible, there should be stakeholder consultation. There should be a lot of inclusion. You see, we don't want a situation where there are surprises, because what do we want the bill to do? We want the bill to be so clear enough that we can have investment flows, to be clear enough that we have sufficient backward integration. You see, the whole era of having Nigerians just producing crude oil and we're not refining and all of those ones. No, the petrochemical industry has significant implication and impact for Nigeria. If you do that appropriately, the linkages are very huge. So what areas where you will talk about specific things like transfer of skills, where host communities will be protected and well taken care of. And what we are asked for is that before you throw these just at the National Assembly without due consultation, ensure that stakeholders are carried along, so that at the end of the day, it's something we're all going to be happy about. Because what do we want after all? We want investment. I want this investment to be used in the interest of Nigeria. We need everybody to look at this. And what we tell people is that we're not the only nation that has found crude oil. A number of nations around us in Africa have found crude oil. And therefore, money will go to an area where the environment is open, transparent, and free. So let's make the process and the laws very open, transparent, competitive, and attractive enough to get the needed investment. So that's what we've told government to do, so that we don't have surprises.
Okay, great. And so that flows into ease of doing business. If one was to say to you, Mr. Jaiyeola, that based on what the federal government has done with regards to ease of doing business, we've moved up in the rankings. Can that be acknowledged?
Yeah, we've moved up because, again, don't forget, before they came in, something like collateral registry, a lot of those things were not worked on. And they've worked on those things. And I imagine that by the time they do the next review, although the World Bank itself is looking at some of the criteria for evaluating this ranking, but by the time they look at the rest review and we see things like karma, now that is signed to law, and we begin to work on sanctity of contracts, and then we take the big work of going to looking at our ports and making easy access to port and making access to credits work, we should be able to move up much more than we are doing. Yes, we have moved up, but we can do a lot better, particularly when we see nations around us in Africa that don't have our potentials, doing a lot better than we are doing. So whilst we commend what has been done, we believe that a lot need to be done, which is why if you see in our report, part of what we ask for is to ensure that we should hasten to do the work we're doing around the Apapa Seaport and around clearing goods in general. We're glad that they're opening the eastern ports, and what we did say is that, look, Onne is now channelized so that it can take a very large inflow of large ships. But beyond that, we should ensure that the linkage between Onne and Port Harcourt is done. There are 18-kilometer rail that they have in there. They should complete it. What this does is that we will avoid the experience we have in Apapa Port when that becomes fully functional. So, good work, but a lot more still needs to be done.
All right, thank you for that, sir. Also, the matter of closed borders, been closed now since August of 2019. However, on the flip side, businesses will say that their profit margins have increased because there's less smuggling of goods coming over the border that used to affect their profit margins. So what's your take on the matter of the closed borders?
Well, I'm not sure that is what you will see, because we will look at the impact on the GDP. If you look at the just released a half-year report, trade in itself went as low as about 20% decline GDP. That's the figures from the MBS. Now, this is not unconnected with our border activity. Yeah, we can always deal with smuggling. What I've always told people is that Closing border might not be the power, that is not the way. There are other non-closure work we can do. Let's use our tariff effectively. The fact of the matter is that if what you have, if people have incentive to smuggle, they will smuggle. So how do we make ourselves competitive enough? And already we're beginning to see the backlash of our closed border. We're seeing what our citizens are facing in the likes of Ghana and co. Because it's a reprisal for our closing border. We did agree, the government said that they need to do with some security matters when it is closed. And we give into that. But closing border cannot be a perpetual matter. It's not in line with our agreement in ECOWAS. And if Nigeria, with the biggest economy in African continent, that's want to be part of AfCFTA, will close its borders, then we can't be competitive. After all, the reality is that unless Africa begin to do businesses among themselves, we aren't going to grow. And we have people in Nigeria that are competent and capable. Therefore, our view as Nesg is permanent closure is not a way out at all. And that's why we make a plea to the Mr. President to hasten to ensure that the border is open as quickly as possible.
All right, that's all the time we have. Thank you so much for joining us to discuss your press release. The CEO of the Nigerian Economic Summit Group, Mr. Laoye Jaiyeola. Thank you so much for your voicing your concerns. You're watching the Global Business Report here on Arise News.